Hello, and welcome to Back Through the Lens, where two film school friends talk about movies through the haze of nostalgia, the good, the bad, and the ones that aren't quite how we remember them. I'm your host, Rachel, and with me is my co host, Joe. Today's movie is Clueless.
School's out for the summer, and it's way too hot to do anything but sit in an air-conditioned theater and watch the newest summer releases. Maybe it's a lighthearted comedy where the main character's biggest conflicts are what to wear to the mall or whether or not they're failing a class. Who knows, maybe we'll add a little character makeover. That's right, we're talking about a summer teen comedy where we can reflect on our yesteryears to a simpler time when we had no bills and only had to worry about if that cute boy or girl liked us.
All right, well, welcome to season 2.
Season 2.
Season 2, all about summer movies. All about the summer movies that we decided we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, summer break, but not for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hope everyone else out there is enjoying it.
I have a feeling most people listening to this do not have a summer break anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's just my kid.
Mm-hmm.
So, that all being said, because I need to discuss what a summer movie is to me,
Mm-hmm.
I'll introduce my first pick for a
Okay.
summer movie theme, which is Clueless, directed by Amy Heckerling, released July 19th, 1995, rated PG-13, loosely based on the novel Emma by Jane Austen. So, if you have not seen Clueless, it follows Cher, a spoiled Beverly Hills blonde, as she navigates high school and dating along with her friends Dion and Ty. And I have to say, I don't really know how a simple couple lines could really sum up Clueless, because any way I could describe it to you, I don't think that really captures like the depth and the layers of this movie, much like the trailer when it originally came out, which I revisited. So for me, a summer movie is very much like teen comedy. I don't know if I can fully explain the type of teen movies that were coming out like all the time, constantly when we were growing up. It wasn't these raunchy teen comedies like the 80s. It was like teen rom-coms, very much marketed toward girls. There was
Oh, yeah.
usually the whole plot was a female main character trying to get the attention of her love interest. There was usually one specific love interest that was like a famous young actor at the time. But to me, this is a summer movie because I would go see it in the summer. Like I was at the theater all the time with my friends seeing whatever romantic comedy, teen comedy, whatever had just come out. In my defense, the very opening of Clueless feels like a summer movie because they're all like hanging out by the pool and just having fun. And I think Cher's narration says something about it being like a Noxzema commercial, which is also funny because I definitely used Noxzema at the time.
I just remember those commercials. Because the beginning had almost like a filter on it, a soft filter.
Hmm.
I remember that from the commercials too, for whatever reason.
Hmm. But for me, when I think of a summer movie, I always picture a group of teenagers in California at a really nice school that has outdoor lockers because they have such nice weather that they can have outdoor lockers. Looking back, maybe it's just because Southern California has much nicer weather than we do. So it's like, in comparison, summer all the time compared to living in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this movie does not take place in the summertime, like as far as the plot. And in fact, later on in the movie, I think I noticed this maybe for the first time this watch, or maybe I did before. It never kind of pinged in my head. But at one point, it's Christmas time. They don't do a lot of Christmas-esque celebrations. It just kind of like is a
Mhm.
passing by thing as they
Mhm.
go out through their year. Where they're hanging Christmas lights at a party, and they're clearly Christmas lights, but it still looks like summertime. Like the weather never changes in this movie ever.
Right, exactly. But yeah, you are right. It takes place over the course of pretty much a full school year, which when I sat down to watch this after we had made our selections for summer movies, I was immediately like, oh my gosh, I messed up, I think. But my defense is that for me, summer movie is a vibe.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
and you know what? This came out in July.
The vibes are real. It feels like summer to me also.
I could have sworn that I saw Clueless in the theater when it came out, But, looking at this, knowing the release date now, I was 10, so I feel like maybe not. But I do know that I rented it a lot with my friends. I also watched it a lot with my mom. Like whenever it was on TV, it was one of those movies if we saw it, we'd stop and watch it together.
Yeah, you say rental, and that's probably how I saw it first. I definitely, again, being 10, didn't see this in theaters, but also probably something that wasn't marketed towards, a 10-year-old boy.
Right, exactly.
So it's either rental from one of the sisters wanting to watch it, or maybe even just when it got aired on TBS or TNT.
I'm actually, I mean, I guess you just said you do have sisters. I'm surprised you even saw it when you were younger because I feel like it was such a girl movie.
Yeah, but, and I'm sure we'll kind of talk about this later, but don't forget that this movie made Alicia Silverstone like the it girl,
Hmm.
and it was hard not to see anything without her in it. And like, you're a budding child, so hormones, and had a crush on her. I'm sure at one point.
It's okay. I had a crush on Paul Rudd because of this movie, so I get it.
There we go.
Yep. Well, I want to get into a little bit of background about how we get to Clueless. Amy Heckerling, the director, she previously directed Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I had no idea. I did not realize that was her. I've also never seen it, so maybe that doesn't really count. But part of why, she got the funding and people were interested in her script for Clueless was because she already had success with that. Between Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Clueless, she directed a few movies, most notably National Lampoon's European Vacation, Look Who's Talking 1 and 2. And because of Look Who's Talking, she's actually one of the most profitable female directors in history.
Oh wow.
I assume it's not a huge list, to be fair, but those movies were huge for her and gave her a little bit more power to make whatever she wanted to make. She did write the script for Clueless herself. Basically, Fox approached her. They had wanted to develop a script about teenagers, but they wanted to focus on the in crowd, is how Amy Heckerling put it. She said she would only do it if she could poke fun at them. Originally, Clueless was developed as a TV pilot. Her producing partner, who she collaborates with a lot, is actually the actress who plays Miss Geist in the movie, the kind of goofy teacher, the one who always
What?
has lipstick on her teeth.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what class she teaches. It's escaping me. I don't think it
I
matters though, but
Potentially history? I don't remember. Well, I remember her heading up the Pismo Beach disaster relief,
yeah, I was gonna say I think it's one of those California teen classes that only exist in movies.
like debate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So apparently, people love the script so much they encouraged her to turn it into a feature length. Fox eventually told her they did not want any more, quote, stupid teenage stuff. So they were passing on it. They also did not like that the script had, in their opinion, too many women in it with three female lead characters,
Whoa.
which, yeah, Cher, Dion, and Ty. If you look at the marketing for the movie, like the main poster is the three girls. Lots of comments from male studio executives about not understanding the script. They also wanted it to be raunchier because this was a time where teen comedies usually were pretty raunchy, and they didn't see the point of it if it didn't have that factor.
Hmm.
Producer Scott Rudin somehow saw the script by chance, said he liked it, and I guess once it got his stamp of approval, or, publicly word was getting around that he liked it, there was a bidding war and Paramount won. So she went from Fox, then over to Paramount to actually get the movie made. And according to Amy Heckerling, every studio exec now swears up and down they really wanted to make Clueless. And she's like, no, none of you wanted to make this movie. Stop.
Everyone
um,
wants to get a ticket on the gravy train.
Yep. I did want to point out that apparently Alicia Silverstone was pretty famous already. She had this breakout movie called The Crush, which I had never heard of.
Hmm.
It's with Carrie Elways from The Princess Bride. I think this came out in 94. She plays a 14-year-old who stalks this grown man
Hmm.
and gets mad that he rejects her advances. Apparently, she won an MTV award for Best Villain.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice.
So she was somewhat known at this point, and then also went on to be in 2 Aerosmith music videos,
Hmm.
which I definitely remember watching those on pop-up video and
Oh
being like,
yeah,
"Oh, that's Cher from Clueless."
yeah.
So, I think it's safe to say that no one else was really known at the time. I went back and watched the Brittany Murphy documentary that's on HBO, What Happened Brittany Murphy, which is like a stupid title, honestly.
Yeah.
But this was her first movie.
Oh really?
She had a lot of acting experience and she had done a lot of like single episodes of TV. Stuff that we probably saw that I didn't even realize she was in. Like she did an episode of Frasier. I can't remember now what all, but like popular sitcoms that I never realized she was in. The beginning, like I said, we open with them all kind of hanging out and having fun. Like it could be summer, who knows? But also the credits again are very 90s, not so much in a cheesy Batman way, I guess, but in a neon, I don't know, Saved by the Bell kind of way, if that
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
No, totally makes sense. I have that in my notes too. It's not as cheesy as when we discussed Batman Forever with the
Mhm.
zooming and the scrolling, and it's just simple. Just Clueless, bright pastels. It does give me Saved by the Bell vibes,
Mhm.
and just also kind of like Lisa Frank.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yes.
So maybe not so summery there, but just like harking back on our childhood. It's gets Lisa Frank's summary because the only time I ever think about it is like being in like the local box shop and getting school supplies right before
Mhm.
school starts. And that's all you see is those crazy bright posters and
Yeah.
folders and
Yep. That just the whole when you think of the 90s, you think of like neon and geometric shapes and Lisa Frank. That's
Mhm.
yep. Immediately we have Cher's narration that takes us through the entire movie, but the just the beginning of that when she starts talking and she's explaining her life, that feels so nostalgic to me. That totally brings me back to watching this as a teenager. I could compare it to when we discussed You've Got Mail and Kathleen Kelly gives her little talk about how she loves New York in the fall. It's just one of those things that to me is immediately comforting and nostalgic. Clueless maybe could have been a comfort movie for me too, now that I'm saying this, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a sucker for a familiar voice, but I also realized watching this I could probably quote it backwards and forwards when she's just, "Daddy's a litigator." We come to the scene where Cher, Alicia Silverstone, in case we haven't mentioned that, is picking out her clothes using a computer program that, previews her outfits on her computer self before she actually changes into anything. I was convinced that this was the height of technology when I was younger. I'm still waiting for it to happen.
I mean, that would be wonderful. Too much thinking in the morning.
Mhm.
I definitely remember this scene. I mean, I think it's pretty iconic, but I'm remembering it from the trailer, like one of the few things from the TV spot, or if I saw it in theaters, the trailer that is, that kind of interested me as a 10-year-old boy. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like
Mhm.
this little program that sorts all her outfits because she obviously, again, they're playing up that she's rich and spoiled. She has so many outfits that she needs a computer to pick it. Also, she has a computer to pick it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, if she had a home computer at all, I think you could assume that she was rich at this point in time.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But she ends up with the famous yellow plaid outfit that is so iconic. I think anytime you see yellow plaid, you assume someone is dressing up as Cher from Clueless. If you were to dress as a character from Clueless for Halloween, like, this is probably the outfit you would use,
At least if you're
and
being Cher for sure. Yeah.
at least if you're being Cher, right? There was an Iggy Azalea music video might have been 10 years ago now, where she dressed up as Cher. They were doing a spoof on Clueless, and it was her and Charlie XCX, and she wore the yellow plaid.
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I am a pro wrestling fan. Somewhat recently that one of the up and coming female wrestlers at the time wore ring gear that was clearly inspired by this infamous, famous yellow plaid. And she kind of calls herself a buff Barbie. So it's like in another world, this could be if Cher went and did wrestling instead of whatever she goes to do in the future of this movie. We stop like right at high school end, so we don't know what happens to Cher.
That is something that I thought about watching this back. Like, I'm really curious how long her relationship with Josh actually lasted.
Well, we'll get into the relationship with Josh here in a second.
Yeah. But back to this beginning, we also are immediately introduced to this concept of Cher as a caregiver, which I think is something that struck both of us on a rewatch, having to pay closer attention to it because we're going to discuss it. This is definitely something that went over my head when I was younger, but we see a lot of her taking care of her dad, especially making sure he's eating right because he has, I think it's alluded to him having heart problems or cholesterol problems. This also gets extended to her, taking in Ty and giving her this makeover, which in Cher's world is a very like good and kind thing to do. It sounds very superficial as I'm explaining it, but there are all these things she does that are silly, but to her is doing good and I don't know, trying to help people in the ways that she sees the world. She's trying to help these people. She sets up those two teachers to fall in love, and to her she's making people happy. She's doing something selfless in her mind. And you also see this becoming more obvious as the movie goes on. She ends up leading that Pismo Beach disaster relief. She's like the volunteer coordinator, I think. And this is actually the part of the movie that is based on Emma. I read an interview with Amy Heckerling when she was trying to figure out how to write a different kind of teen comedy. She liked the idea of the character of Emma in the novel. She's like the leader, she gets people to do things, but not in a manipulative way. And we see throughout the movie Cher's always giving Ty advice or saying, you shouldn't date high school boys, or you, I don't know, shouldn't smoke pot unless you're at a party and only doing it once in a while. It's things that, yes, she is being the leader of the group and telling people what to do, but she thinks she's helping or giving good advice. And apparently that is a lot of what the character of Emma is. And part of this too is Amy Heckerling trying to figure out how to write a script that was about the in crowd, so to speak, the cool kids, because that was originally what she was hired to do, without making you hate these people.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I don't hate Cher. And I think there's layers to her as a caregiver because there's some things that do seem a little superficial, like a
Mhm.
makeover. But I think in a different setting or movie, it would be just that, like a pet project. Like, I'm going to make the nerdy girl hot or whatever. And we've seen that in
Mhm.
some other movies. And
Oh, for
that's
sure.
maybe part of it, but I don't think that's exactly her angle.
Mhm.
Like, she takes care of her dad because, the doctor, like, she mentions the doctor says, like, you can't eat bacon or whatever because your cholesterol's high. And she's trying to take care of him. And we have to mention here that this is another movie pick that we have that is only one parent.
Could be a Disney movie because her mom's dead.
Right. Yeah. And her mom had a tragic liposuction accident. That's how she died. Uh,
She says routine liposuction.
yeah.
Routine.
Well, yeah. So anyway, she's kind of at home filling in that motherly role.
Mm,
And you kind of see
true.
it go over into high school where, she's, whether she got it one way or the other, but she is the leader of these friends. They kind of
Mhm.
look to her to advice, especially when new girl Ty comes in the picture.
Yeah. And Cher is the one that leads the idea of taking tie-in, so to speak, because I remember Dion's not so much into it. But still, regardless of the makeover and maybe the more superficial stuff, befriending the new girl in school is not nothing. Like that probably would mean a lot to Ty, even if they
Right.
hadn't given her a total makeover.
Hmm.
But that being said, we automatically go into her picking up Dion for school, and they're talking about how they became friends because they both know what it's like to have people be jealous of them. So we have layers here.
Yeah.
And she and Dion are both named after famous singers who are now doing infomercials.
Yeah, I really like that line.
Hmm.
And also, I remember seeing a bunch of infomercials in the 90s. Usually late night TV, but
Yeah, when I was watching this back, I was immediately like, wow, there is nothing more 90s than an infomercial.
hmm. Yeah. Can't get that in a streaming service. Boom.
Yeah, yeah. But I do like Cher's narration so much. She's so matter of fact about everything, even if it's something really silly.
Yeah, it just seems factual.
They get to school, like I said, really nice campus. Everyone's hanging out outside. This does not happen in real life, at least in Ohio. In the trailer, they called it Beverly Hills High School, which I do not think is what it's called in the movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's Preston Alcott High School.
I don't even recall the name of the high school.
I just don't remember it being called Beverly Hills High School, but in the trailer, it is. But also, maybe in the trailer, they're just trying to set a location for you.
Hmm.
But we meet Dion's boyfriend, Murray.
You mean Turk,
Right.
aka Donald Faison?
Yep.
Yeah, knew he was in the movie, but forgot how quickly we meet all these characters, and
Hmm.
it's just excited to see a familiar face because I obviously watched Scrubs, and so it was fun to kind of see him in his younger role. I mean, at first when you meet him too, he kind of rubs me the wrong way because how he talks to Dee.
Hmm.
He just doesn't use her name or anything like kind of like love language besides he just calls her woman, like woman, 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 and she kind
Yeah.
of calls him out on it,
Hmm.
and then he explains it in like a more an adult way, I guess. His language changes, and he kind of like
Hmm.
really gets like verbose about why he calls it, and it makes sense. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, still don't love it, but if it works for the two of you and you explain your reason, then you know what, good for you.
Hmm. Yep.
There'll be a lot of talk of language in this movie as we go on,
Hmm.
but both dumb and good,
Yeah.
and it's always like intertwined, and they'll say things that they'll use vocabulary that will either not make sense in context. You're like, oh well, you tried, but at least you knew the word, or they'll actually have this like profound statement using all the
Hmm.
right words and like words I had to like look up still. Like, what does this word mean? Did she use that right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool how it gets intertwined because I guess when you're that age, you're in school. Obviously, they're in school and they're learning because that's what you do at school, and obviously in
Hmm.
English class. But sometimes you're still trying to, you're still a kid and you're using kid language.
Yeah. I do think that's probably one of the reasons I like this movie so much still, though, is that the characters obviously are capable of saying some really dumb things, but then also are smarter than they first appear. And maybe this is a good point to bring up that the trailer really just showed you like the ditziest one liners. I don't think you could have had any idea how clever of a script this was going into it if you had just seen the trailer and that was it. You just have the really silly things like Cher hitting the car while she's driving and saying like, "Oh, should I leave them a note?" And just a compilation of the dumbest moments really. And they show her making out with a lot of boys, which is funny because she doesn't really. Like it
Yeah.
a lot of the movie is not about Cher dating. You know what I
No.
mean? And the trailer definitely makes it sound like she's just this ditzy blonde who loves to shop, and the whole movie is about her trying to find a boyfriend. And they even spoil her kissing Josh because they show the clip of her kissing Josh on the stairs at the end.
Yeah, they were really pushing like towards the female audience there. Like, oh, it's a date movie.
Yes.
which it could be. It's obviously the studios were hoping they would get more asses in seats if they showed like a clueless blonde
Mm-hmm.
doing dumb things. I do remember the car part from the trailer.
Yeah. And her like falling off the bed when
Oh
she's
yeah,
on the bed with Christian, like she's trying to flip her hair and she ends up rolling off the bed, like just anything you could think of that would be really stereotypically ditzy. That's what the trailer was. No real peek at, like I said, how smart the script actually is, but I think you could argue that's why it's still so popular now
yeah.
because there's more to it than just look at these stupid girls. Toward the end of this scene, Cher leaves Dion and Murray together and she makes a comment about how gross high school boys are. And one comes by and tries to put his arm around her and she says, as if. And I feel like that's kind of our introduction to the very particular Clueless slang. I have a feeling that some of this was real slang, which I'll get into a little bit in a moment because Amy Heckerling did sit in on some classes in Southern California, like some high schools.
Nice.
I don't know, however, if was some of this made up for the movie and became popular later, or was this already slang being used that they put into the movie? Because I know, at least for me, in the years after this was released around school, people would at least say as if, and a few of the less silly sounding phrases, I guess. Like, no one would say buggin' in real life, at least not in my school.
No, I remember as if a lot, but
Hmm.
you mentioned the boy putting his arm around her, and
Hmm.
she basically like shoos him off, which is already the exact opposite of this trailer.
Hmm.
Because if this
Yes.
was Cher from the trailer, that would have
Hmm.
been like an opportunity to like talk to a cute boy at high school. But
Hmm.
she thinks of them all as boys and wants nothing to do with them.
Yeah, as like little boys, yes.
Yeah,
We have this scene where Cher has to give a debate in her debate class, which, first of all, I thought that high school would be a lot of specialized classes like this, such as debate. It was not true.
I didn't have a debate class in my high school.
I just don't think we really had electives at my high school.
We had some. I actually had a film class, which is what got me to where we are now. Look at that.
Dang, good for
Yeah.
you. I did not. I specifically remember there being a discussion at undergrad about requiring people to submit short films to get into the program, like for future classes. And I spoke up and told them I never even touched a camera till I got to college because I didn't have access to anything like that in high school. But obviously, Cher is at a really rich high school because they have all these other classes.
Yeah, I feel like they never have a regular class in this movie. They talk about them, but you don't see her go to any of. Oh, I guess gym class
Yeah, they do. But in gym class, they are playing tennis
and outdoors.
and outdoors, and they have like the ball machine.
Yeah.
Do you know what I did in gym class? They'd be like, run on this beat up path and try not to trip in the holes.
But debate class.
Debate
I feel
class.
was this in the trailer? Either way, it's a good example of the mixed use of language because I feel like as a 10-year-old or however old, I can't relate to her personalized
Hmm.
story that she makes a
Hmm.
parallel to of like having this grandiose 50th birthday for her father and people didn't RSVP and they just showed up and they had to make do.
Hmm.
But I feel like the idea is there and I feel for a high schooler of 15 that
Hmm.
which also she seems to be doing this on the spot. Good for her. I feel like it made a good point. I feel like Amber bitched out. She should have at least attempted to counter it, even if it didn't make sense.
The topic they're debating is whether, I guess, we should be allowing Haitian refugees to settle in America. Really bizarre how that exact debate could have happened now.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
Literally was brought up. Haitian refugees was brought up during a presidential debate recently. Also, the way that Cher says Haitians, she says it like Haitians. She doesn't say it correctly.
no,
That is apparently how Alicia Silverstone thought you pronounced it in real life, and they kept it in.
nice.
Yeah. Amy Heckerling told people not to correct her, and they kept that. Also, Mr. Hall is the debate teacher.
Hmm.
There was a real Mr. Hall whose debate class Amy Heckerling sat in on when she was kind of doing research for the script. She kind of wanted to get a sense of how, I guess, teenagers at the time spoke, how they dressed, all that. The real Mr. Hall is the principal that brings Ty over during the gym class.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's
and
kind of
they
cool.
she kind of paid homage to him by naming the debate teacher after him in the movie.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah, I liked that. Paul Rudd shows up as Josh, Cher's ex-stepbrother.
Ex stepbrother.
Ex-stepbrother. Do you want to talk about that?
Ah, my. Well, we have to.
I know.
It's like a
I
big part of the movie.
yeah.
What part do we talk about first? I guess let's
Well,
talk about the ex stepbrother part.
yes, let's talk about that. Apparently, his mom was married to Cher's dad very briefly. So briefly that they barely know each other. So briefly that they would never think of each other as siblings. And that's hammered
Never,
home a lot.
never, ever.
Never, ever.
And
Uh,
which is funny because every time you start to forget that, they remind us.
mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, these are just two people. Because then you see Josh work with her dad a lot. So it's just like, okay, this is like young intern or whatever. And then like, oh yeah, your mom called. Oh, god damn it. Yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Uh Josh,
There,
we don't even know each other. Why are you living here? You never even used to live here. You're not even my stepbrother anymore. Like, God, why do we have to do this? Like, he could have been related to them in any other way, as far as like maybe to the dad, or like I said, he could have just been an undergrad working with Cher's dad.
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking actually when you first brought this up that he's there to work with her dad. But yeah, it gets hammered home more than it probably needs to be. Like, there's a scene later in the movie where Cher is trying to convince Josh to just stay with them for, I want to say it's spring break, some upcoming break at college. And he's like, well, it wouldn't be that much fun to have a brother type hanging around while you're out with your friends. And she's like, Josh, you are not my brother. Like,
Hmm.
you also just didn't even have to bring that up again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is I think after they're starting to become more friendly with each other.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, we.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And there's a part where Cher's dad says, you divorce wives, you don't divorce children, which I also think is funny just because her dad is so gruff and scary in a lot of ways, but he also has like this little like softy inside, kind of like Cher in a way being this ditz on the outside. But still, things keep getting brought up that don't really have to be, especially because we're supposed to be rooting for them to get together.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, so the facts are there that
Hmm.
their parents were married seemingly briefly, probably annulled. I'm assuming that because it was quick, and also he's a lawyer, so why not?
Right.
It also makes it just taste better when I say it like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I would like to say that in one of the interviews I read with Amy Heckerling, they wanted to talk to her about the 25th anniversary of Clueless. She said, what could you ask me that hasn't already been asked about Clueless? Are you going to ask me if Cher and Josh's relationship was incestuous? Because that's all anyone ever asks me now, which is funny
so
because I feel like growing up in like the BuzzFeed era of the internet, they wrote a lot of like hot takes about how Clueless is actually problematic.
every movie's problematic if you think about it too much.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel about their relationship the way I feel about Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan and You've Got Mail. Like I just don't want to think about it too hard.
Hmm.
I just want to enjoy this.
So not thinking about it too hard. Let's think about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
If you if you get past that, they're barely even worse step siblings at one point.
Mhm,
Sure. But then they mentioned that he's in college, and I don't think
mhm.
he's a freshman. But even if he was, she's still, reminder, 15 years old.
Yes. So, first of all, I completely forgot that the girls are supposed to be 15. I
Hmm.
think by the end of the movie, they've turned 16, conveniently by the time she is like actually dating Josh. So we could maybe the age of consent is 16, maybe. But the age difference bothers me actually so much more than the step sibling relationship because I also don't understand why a college undergrad would be interested in a 15-year-old.
Right.
Right. My impression of Josh is that he's had more college behind him than just 1 year.
Yes.
Apparently, the internet thinks he is 18 and a freshman in college, but I don't know if we're just saying that to make us feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't believe that. It's just some of the when he first comes into the picture, and there's some riffing between the two of them. There's a lot of like jokes Cher makes to Josh about his college experience. And I feel like that does not happen overnight when you go from senior in high school to freshman in college. Like you're still pretty much a senior in high school. But like the books he's reading, the fact that he's watching news and then she watches cartoons or like the stereotypical like sad college music, like that all doesn't
Mhm.
change over that summer break. Like he
Right.
feels like, and then also like working with her dad. I feel like he's at least 2 years in. If we're trying to make ourselves feel better, he's at least 2 years in college.
That's how I felt, like you said, because he's working with Cher's dad and he has like some knowledge of what he's doing. I just feel like it wouldn't be a freshman year kind of situation. And then also they, go to great lengths to poke fun at that kind of college idealism. Like you said, he's always watching the news. You see him wearing Amnesty International shirts, talking about environmentalism and different activism and things he's involved with that I just felt like he was more entrenched in college life than a freshman.
Hmm. And later in the movie, I feel like he's old enough to drink.
That's the thing too. I kept getting the impression that he was old enough to drink, not even necessarily later in the movie, just that he was old enough to drink, but I don't know. I mean maybe because I'm also at an age where it is hard for me now to believe that these people are teenagers in general. Like when I
Well, yeah,
was when I was watching this as a kid, I mean, at least for me, I always thought like everyone who was older than me looked so much older than me and so cool and whatever. So to me, I'd be like, yeah, this is what high school's going to be like. This is what everything's going to look like. It did not at all.
no,
But, and I think this rewatch is when it really struck me too, like how much older they all look. Just looking back as to what I looked like at 15, and then also just living in a neighborhood with a lot of kids. Like I see a lot of teenagers that look nothing like this.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like 15 just feels so young for a college guy to be into. I don't know why 16 makes it a little better, but
It doesn't.
well, if he's 18, like which
He's
he
not.
supposedly is, I know,
Nope.
right? But I don't think he is.
I'm
I
shutting
think
that down right now.
I
No,
think
this is true.
yeah, I think the internet just wants to feel better about it. And I do appreciate that because I do think they're very cute together. And I had such a crush on Paul Rudd in this movie. I never saw him in anything else until he popped up on Friends as Phoebe's husband, but and I remember when he was on Friends, I was like, "Oh my god, it's that cute guy from Clueless." Oh, speaking of how people dress in this movie.
Yeah, the fashion in this movie is definitely well. We mentioned the iconic plaid skirt
Mhm,
jacket combo. Now,
mhm.
obviously, for at least for me or for us, I always thought fashion was kind of cool. At least the girls for most of the time. I don't know. Amber's stuff was kind of crazy. We always get that in Ohio. We see these movies from California, and that's, I mean, fashion kind of comes from the coasts or Europe and comes inward to the Midwest. So there's
Mhm,
always these cool things, but sometimes it's also very ridiculous and it doesn't make it this far, thank God. And there's a
mhm.
lot of weird hats in this movie. There's a few like crowd shots of just like the school, and everyone's got these different hats on. And
Yeah.
I'm watching this on this rewatch. I'm watching it with my wife, and she said, if I could make a drinking game for this movie, it would be drink every time you see a new hat. She said it before this like scene where just montage of these boys wearing hats, and I turned to her and go, "Well, we'd be dead right now."
Yeah. It's such a good point, though. There are so many hats,
A lot of
and
hats,
none that I've ever seen in a real life setting.
especially in school. They don't let you wear hats at school.
That's true, they definitely do not. I will say the for as ridiculous as some of the girls' outfits are, the boys I feel like were a lot more realistic.
Yeah, in a good and bad way.
Yeah.
The one I don't think maybe later, but she talks about boys just being boys in high school, and then they show this foursome of boys who like you just never see them before or after. It's just like
Like
oh
background,
yeah,
yeah.
it's over. Cher's voiceover is on these boys. She talks about how they don't have any sense of dress, which explains her attraction to Josh, but I don't get the other way around. But anyway,
Mhm.
they are like the worst dressed boys I've ever seen in any high school. They just look sloppy. Like they take all the tropes of different like cliques, like skaters and jocks and all those
Mhm.
things, and kind of put them in a blender and threw it on these four boys.
Yeah.
Like it just looks so bad.
Mhm.
It's like instead of the closet computer program outfit picker outer,
Mhm.
they just jumped into a pile and crawled out. Whatever stuck to them worked.
Threw him in a pile, crawled out. That is what it looks like though, because it also doesn't even they don't even look like they've bathed. Like, it's really
No,
bad.
yeah,
I'm picturing
mm.
this scene right now, yes. I did make a note that I feel like Ty is the only girl whose outfits are somewhat realistic. Like, that I would see maybe actually out in the wild. Just a kind of a normal, like, long sleeve shirt, corduroy skirt kind of combo. No
Yeah.
hats.
No hats.
No
She
hats.
has like overalls, which was big in the '90s.
That is true.
I also got to feel like her fashion style before the makeover is
Mhm.
different. Not just because she's a new girl, but we also got to remember there is a class difference. Like just in general, these kids go to this school.
Yes.
They can afford the new high fashion stuff,
Mhm.
which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you said, we meet Ty pretty early than I remember in the film, and this is their outdoor gym class where they're playing
Mhm.
tennis or trying to hit a ball from a machine. The teacher's like, "All right, who's next?" And I think the three of our main girls, besides Ty, like Dee, Cher, and Amber, are there, and they all have reasons for not being able to hit this ball. Amber's
Yeah.
is that her doctor said her plastic surgeon doesn't want her nose to get. I remember
He told me not to do any activity where balls fly at my nose.
yes, yes,
Mhm.
which is a hilarious, but we get the idea that she had some sort of surgery done on her nose,
Mhm.
obviously. But throughout the film, I noticed, and they're all background characters besides Amber. You see, and these are all girls. I've also noticed that they have bandages, whether they're on their mostly nose or chin. But it's
Mhm.
like one girl in the hallway. And then later on, you see like two girls talking. And then later on, there's a big scene where they're having outdoor lunch, and behind the popular kids table, our main characters, there's like three or four girls all at a table with different bandages on.
Yeah.
And we don't know what Amy was saying exactly, but I think that quote you mentioned that she wanted to do a teen movie, but still kind of poke fun of them.
Mhm.
She was poking.
Yeah, yeah. But this brings us to where we meet Ty. I would like to point out that she actually was 17 when she made this movie. I think she was the only one who was an actual teenager, although I think Alicia Silverstone was 18. But everyone else was older. The documentary I watched about Brittany Murphy, she was the youngest one on set, they all
Mm,
said. And I guess she sort of was an outcast in real life because she was new to Hollywood. It was her first movie. So there was kind of an element of everyone else being a little more used to things than she was. But so many lines when we first meet Ty just totally went over my head when I was a kid. She is surprised they have Coke at the school. She says she needs an herbal refreshment. She tells Cher and Dee that she's never had straight friends before. All of this went over my head.
oh yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
You mean she wasn't
So
talking about tea?
yeah, right. So we see, Cher kinda takes her under her wing, makes her over. Part of this makeover is they start working out together, and also they have to read 1 book a week, and I think it's 1 book a week, and Cher's book is called Fit or Fat, and
Hmm.
it just made me realize how much of that, like, kind of gross 90s, like, diet culture was in this. They do talk a lot about working out, but just as a way to be thin, not as, a way to be healthy. Obviously, they hate gym class. They talk about eating right, but in a way that's really derogatory. Like, Cher calls herself a heifer because she had some candy, and she lists it, and it's like, "Oh, I had 3 M&Ms," and, it's, like, not that much. When they have that first lunch with Ty, before Ty comes back to the table after she meets Travis, we have this little bit where Cher and Dion are talking, and Cher's talking about how if you, like, cut your food a certain way or chew it however many times, it's better for fat burning or something, and then eventually when Ty realizes that Elton is not into her, her immediate reaction is, "It's my hips, isn't it?" And she is saying this while also being skinny enough to wear a bare midriff.
Right. I feel like this kind of goes back to the double layering I had mentioned with the language,
Mhm.
where share. I had 3 M&Ms. I probably watched this movie and had an entire box of M&Ms. Who knows?
Right?
But then, like earlier, or even I think throughout the movie, anytime they're having dinner together with her father, which is kind of often, she's
Mhm.
still like harping on him to eat healthy, and this is because like an internal health thing. It's
Mhm.
not, the doctor says you're overweight. It's high cholesterol or a heart issue.
Yeah, she's never harping on her dad's weight
Right.
specifically. Mhm.
We see her and Ty doing one of the many '90s exercise on tape with their
Mhm. Mhm.
very fun, outlandish unitards or whatever, the workout uniform,
Yeah.
but they don't participate in gym class.
Mhm. I feel like her dad is supposed to eat healthy in order to be healthy. I feel like the girls are just concerned about fat. And that's,
Right.
to me, is, like I said, the 90s diet culture, like
Yeah. But if Cher can like
Snapwells
take that
and
info that she has from her
mhm,
dad's doctor, what he should be
mhm.
eating, and
Yeah,
just apply it, or
yeah.
work out at home, or you can just work out at the gym class you have that's nice enough to be outside, and you can learn how to play tennis, which is kind of cool,
Yeah.
which is very physical. You burn a lot of calories running around tennis courts.
I'd rather do that than, like, run a mile.
Yeah. Anyway.
I do really like the whole idea that Cher is able to argue her way to better grades. We see in the very
Hmm.
beginning, she gets her report card, and it's lower than she wants it to be, and she says she's going to basically debate all her teachers and explain why she deserves better grades, and she does it. But at the same time, she comes home at the very beginning saying she got a 98 on her geometry test, which is, like, probably better than I did in geometry. So she's
Right.
not stupid.
No. I think that, again, layers here.
Mhm.
We are seeing the Cher from the trailer.
Mhm.
So we'll say that's Clueless Cher. And she's got these bad grades. And in another movie, she would be more bratty and demanding and manipulative to change the grades,
Or not even care about her grades, I would think.
or not even care. Like she just cares about shopping and boys.
Mhm.
But Cher wants to get good grades. She wants to go to college. She wants to make her dad proud. And
Mhm.
so it's still seen kind of funny as she is getting her way with the grades, but the way she does it is and some of these excuses maybe aren't the best, but she still uses what she can and
Mhm.
debates these different teachers, including her debate teacher, to
Mhm.
get better grades.
Yeah.
Yes, there is the other storyline of getting the two teachers together so they're happier, so everyone gets good grades. So there's that too. So there's
Mhm.
kind of more of the bratty, angle, I guess. Like we're just
Yeah.
all going to get good grades because these teachers are happy. Well, the point I'm making is because they have a debate class in her school that she partakes in, the fact that she goes around debating with different teachers to get better grades, to me, automatically gives her an A in debate class.
Yeah, I get that.
Like, clearly she is paying attention in that class.
Yeah. I wanted to point out I took a closer look at her report card when she, like, gives it back to her dad after it's, better. the comment for her grade in geometry, I think she gets an A in geometry, and the teacher's comment is nice shapes, as if you just draw shapes in geometry.
Interesting.
Also,
Hmm.
her report card shows her name, I noticed, as Cher Hamilton. I'm pretty sure their last name is Horowitz in the movie. I
Huh.
feel like I've always heard her referred to as Cher Horowitz. How on earth did Cher and Ty not realize that Elton was into Cher?
Clueless.
There-
I mean, come on. Set me up.
I noticed watching this back that there's a montage, like you said, everyone's happy the two teachers fell in love and are giving them better grades, or, they're going easier on them, no homework. There are two instances during that montage where Elton grabs Cher and kisses her, and he doesn't kiss her on the lips, but it's still more than a quick peck on the cheek, and he makes a big deal to, like, really hold on to her and give her a
Hmm.
big kiss both times. Obviously, there's the suck and blow game they play at that party.
Yeah.
He drops the card so he can kiss her. I do feel like him keeping that photo of Ty in his locker is a bit of a stretch. He says later he hung that picture up in his locker because Cher took the picture. That's the only one where I could completely understand why they thought he had a thing for Ty, seeing that picture in
100%.
his locker. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the other things are there, I guess, especially at the party where he's like not trying to focus on Ty.
Mhm.
But when she's arguing, like, I thought you liked Ty, you hung that picture up. It's like, no, that's the photo you took because they do like a little photo shoot for whatever reason. Also, speaking of Amber's outrageous outfits, that scene by the fountain, dear Lord, her hair's all crazy, her outfit, I don't know. She just whole nother world,
She had to have wires in her pigtails, right?
I would imagine,
Because
yeah.
they're just, like, sticking, like, sideways from her head.
If I was in high school and I had a photo of another girl in my locker of not a girl I liked, it better have been like a photo she took and it was in like the Plain Dealer or something and it said like photo taken by this girl Joe likes. That would be the only way that would make sense to me, right? Or if like a famous person, but like if you're talking about like high school people, if I had a photo of a girl in my locker from high school, everyone would assume it's because I like the girl. Also, usually you don't do that unless the guy or girl gives it to you. Like you don't just
Yeah.
put a random photo of somebody in your locker because that's very stalkerish, I guess. I get why everyone's confused for Elton and Ty.
Yeah. But like you said, when we get to the party, especially that scene where they're leaving and Elton is he's trying so hard to drive Cher home and specifically to not drive Ty home. He
Hmm.
obviously wants to be alone with Cher. I don't know how none of them saw that coming.
To be fair, the reasonings he gives does make sense. I mean, I don't know the geography where
Oh,
they're at,
right.
but
Mhm.
like he's like, well, no, you live here, I live here. We're going the same way. If I take her home, I got to double back and blah blah blah. And so it does make sense,
It makes sense, but if you like the girl, it wouldn't matter.
right?
You would want to be spending some time with her, yes. And also to your Christmas decoration observation, Ty just, like, steals an entire plastic snowman from this party. She's, like, sitting in the front seat with it, like, holding
Yeah,
this, like, it's almost as big as her.
when she's like maybe concussed.
Maybe concussed, yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. Ty and Travis are so cute together,
Hmm.
and I felt so bad for him when she gets hit in the head and he's, like, really trying to make sure she's okay, trying to get in there so he can help her, and they just shove him away and they say, "Ty would want you to enjoy the party." Like she
Right.
died.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, okay.
I also love when they're trying to ask her questions to keep her, awake and also to see how bad things are, and Elton asks her, I think, what's 7 times 7? It's some sort of multiplication problem, and Cher yells, "Stuff she knows!"
Right.
Ugh. Um,
Poor Ty.
I know. I just love all of this. I love Ty as a character. I'm really glad she didn't end up with Elton. Elton kinda sucks.
Elton does
Um,
sucks.
which brings us to Elton's scene with Cher in the car where he, says that he likes her, doesn't like Ty. You notice something in this scene that I have never noticed before.
Yeah. So they're explaining this whole situation we just talked about with the photograph in the locker and like all this stuff like, oh, I like you and this and that. And Cher, who A, doesn't like high school boys, and B, I think was maybe more focused on playing matchmaker than noticing these things. She said something like along the lines of like, am I having a Twin Peaks moment or something like that?
Mhm.
And I think when I've seen this before, I don't think I even knew what Twin Peaks was.
Mhm.
And it's so fast, it's hard to catch. And so the vibe I'm getting is like she's obviously confused because she thought Elton liked Ty, or she was maybe hallucinating that because she was clearly forcing it.
But this brings us to, I'd say, a fairly famous part of the movie where, she gets out of the car because Elton's coming on to her. And I do think it's funny though, where when she keeps yelling at him to leave her alone and then he finally drives off and she's like, wait, where are you going? Because then she
Right.
realizes she's abandoned in this gas station, gets robbed at gunpoint. The guy tells her to lay on the ground and she says, no, you don't understand. My dress is an Alaya. And he says, in a whata? And she says, it's like this really important designer. The actual designer, Alaya, passed away a few years ago. And everything I saw about it that popped up, in the news was, you probably remember this designer from Clueless. And I kind of feel bad maybe that he wasn't more of a household name except for like this one line in this one movie. But yes, that is all I knew him from was Clueless.
Yeah, someone who doesn't know anything about fashion, I would agree.
My family and I went to Paris recently, and at the Louvre, there was an exhibit of famous designers, I guess, they were designing dresses that you could imagine being worn in, the 1700s, 1800s by French nobility, kings and queens, whatever. But there was definitely a modern twist. And one of the designers was Alaya, and all I could think of was Clueless. And I just kept thinking, like, I'm sure this is what they all were hoping for
Right.
when
Yes.
putting this together. Like, oh, the guy from Clueless. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, get your fame somewhere. So now that Elton's out, enter Christian,
Yep.
which this is the first time we see Cher like actually liking a high school boy.
Hmm.
He walks into the classroom and she like what feigns dropping a pen or pencil, and he picks
Hmm.
it up and compliments her legs, and she thinks he's clearly into her.
Yep.
He is not.
Yep.
Uh,
Spoiler alert, he's not.
yeah.
I did not get any of these clues that he was gay when I was watching this as a kid. There are even apparently some things I never picked up on that I didn't realize until I was like looking into the movie a little bit more. I guess when he first enters the classroom, there's a sign behind him that says end discrimination, and there's a reference to the army, and I think they're talking about don't ask, don't tell.
Uh huh. Okay.
Yeah, but you
I would
don't
have never got that. Yeah.
no, because he's in the doorway and this is in the hallway, and you don't even see the whole sign until he like walks out of the doorway. There's also a piece of paper on a bulletin board near him that says something like the road to nowhere, which some people have taken as, it's when Cher first sees him, but you pan past the sign that says the road to nowhere, like this isn't going to lead anywhere, her
Uh huh.
interest in him. I
Okay. Okay.
I kind of feel like some of these are stretches, to be honest, but there were a few things that I definitely noticed rewatching it. Like at one point when he's on the phone with her, he's like at an art museum and the painting that he's standing in front of is like two men together. Obviously, the movies he brings over.
Yeah, I think I didn't catch any of that other stuff, but definitely when he's over to hang out, the two movies he brings
Mhm.
over is what Some Like It Hot
Yeah.
and Spartacus.
Some Like It Hot, they're men who go undercover as like women.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that famous line at the end where one of the men dressed as women ends up with a man who is very interested in him, thinking he's a woman, and he says, I have something to confess. I'm a man, and like takes his wig off, and the guy goes, well, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And then also in Spartacus, especially in the scene they're showing, which is also Tony Curtis in both of these movies, they're basically discussing how this, I want to say it's like a servant boy that someone sent over, I can't remember, but there's this whole thing about the emperor. Basically, he could go both ways is what the scene amounts to. There's
Okay.
a lot of symbolism and subtext, and he's going to end up having relations with this like Tony Curtis boy. So,
So he likes Tony Curtis.
yeah.
That scene though is funny because Cher is clearly like putting it all on.
Yeah, she's so into him.
Yeah, and she's like this. She's rubbing her feet on him. He's like, "What are you
Mhm.
doing? My feet are cold." So he like gets up, takes a pillow, and just like smashes her feet with it, and like makes sure like they're
Mhm.
covered. He's like, and then he just like gleefully gets back on his belly and like
Yep.
hands under the chin, watching the movie.
Yep.
So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. I do really like when he picks her up for their first, well, she thinks it's a date, I guess. This is when she comes down the stairs in like a slip dress,
Hmm.
and her dad says, "What are you wearing?" And she says, "It's a dress." And he says, "Says who?" And she says, "Calvin Klein." And my mom and I quote that all the time, especially when like anytime I've been shopping for a dress for something like prom or like some special event, if she's with me, we'll be like, "Oh, it said Calvin Klein." Like, not that not that I even would ever wear, you know, the type of dress Cher wore to like some important event. But then also when he tells her to cover up and she's like, "Duh, I was going to." And it's like the thinnest, like see-through, I think it's
Shawl.
supposed to be like a jacket, but it's like it almost looks like she just put a see-through blouse over herself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I like this scene because a lot of things I noticed in it. First of all, I know we've already seen Christian before. But when he comes over to pick her up for this not date, for
Mhm.
some reason when he like comes through the door, I couldn't help but think of 90210, which my older sister watched. And it's just like to me, he's like, we have Jason Priestley at home. Like if he was sorry, Christian. So if he was on the show, he probably would like play Priestley's younger brother or something. That's like the vibe he gives me. So still like cool
Mhm.
kid, California boy.
Yes.
When Cher goes to get her see-through blouse thing to cover up her slip, there's some lines I noticed. The dad has some nice quips, and so Christian's wearing like these high-waisted pants that could look like maybe the Zoot Suit era. He's got
Mhm.
an open button up shirt with a tank top underneath and this fedora looking hat.
Mhm.
And the dad says something like, "Oh, you think the death of Sammy Davis left an opening in the Rat Pack?" And he just like kind of scoffs at him and takes his hat off. They have a little back and forth, and he kind of gets smarmy with the dad.
Mhm.
And as they're leaving, the dad shouts, "Hey, you, if anything happens to my daughter, I have a 45 and a shovel. I doubt anyone would miss you."
Yeah.
He just like is poking fun at this kid and how much he thinks he's a little brat.
Well, yeah, because when he first comes in, Cher's dad asks if he drinks, and he's like, "Nah, I'm good." And he's like,
Oh,
"What are you, an
yeah.
idiot? Why would I be offering to drink to a teenager who's driving my daughter?"
Yeah.
I do like when they get outside and Christian says, "Your dad's really scary." And Cher's like, "Oh, isn't he?" Like all dreamy,
Yeah.
like he's this great dad. And then also they put on Billie Holiday, and he asks Cher if she likes Billie Holiday, and Cher says, "I love him."
Yeah.
Oh, poor Cher. But this is also where we start to see Josh, having some feelings for Cher because he decides to go follow her to this party. He's very like, "I didn't like that guy. I should go to this party." And then when he gets up and tells Cher's dad, like, "I'll watch him for you, sir," or whatever, like that
Yeah.
line is like so cheesy.
What does he call him?
Well, after they leave the party, he calls him the ring-a-ding kid.
That's it.
Yeah. Because he takes Cher and Ty home because Christian wants to stay and dance with the guys he met.
Hmm.
And again, totally went over my head as a younger person. And he says, "What, you didn't want to make a night of it with the ring-a-ding kid?"
This
Uh,
party, by the way, you in your notes had mentioned it being a concert. I don't believe it's a concert.
no, you are correct. It's a party. They call it a party.
There's like 20 people, which is like a nice party, but it'd be a really shitty concert.
Sure.
But so we see. So Christian walks away to get a beer, and he borrows
Mhm.
money from Cher.
First of all, he calls it a brewski and then
Yeah,
kinda makes a little high pitched noise at the end because he can't believe they're charging for them.
right, at this party slash
Yeah,
concert.
yeah.
But we see him in the distance talking to the bartender, and Ty's there with Cher, and he's like, "Oh, look how sweet he is. He's like not even talking to any of the girls." And this girl comes up to him and like kind of like earlier in the film where the boy puts his arm around Cher at the
Mhm.
beginning.
Yeah.
Kind of does something like that to Christian, and he just like grabs her hand and like removes it very physically off of his being.
Mhm.
Which, again, you can look at it different ways. Like to the girls, like, oh yeah, Christian's like Cher, so he's thwarting off these attempts from other women. But then which right there in a snapshot, sure. Then he's like really engaged in conversation with the male bartender,
Yes.
like physically, like just getting closer and closer to him.
Yeah, he's
Um,
really leaning in.
yeah,
Yep. The one part I love about this party, though, is when Ty walks in, she, like, waves to Cher from the top of this set of stairs and then falls down the stairs. And Cher's assuring her that no one saw it, it's okay, and this guy runs up to her immediately and is like, "Wow, that looked really bad, are you okay?" And also, I think you pointed out this guy's, like, really old looking too.
yeah. He's older than Josh.
There's no way this man is a teenager. Ah,
Maybe he's like the band's roadie or something.
they're, like, really straight-laced roadie. He looks like an accountant that came to the party.
He's the health inspector.
I recently tripped and fell in public, and it was really bad, and, like, I'm okay, but it looked really bad, and, a stranger made sure to come up to me and, like, tell me it looked bad and ask if I was okay, and again, thought of Clueless. Also, this is where we get the scene where they call Amber a Monet, because if you look at her from far away, it looks fine, but then close up, it's a whole mess. This is literally what I think of when like, at our art museum, there are some Monets. I've been to some other art museums where I've seen, like, actual Monets, and, like, again, I just think of Clueless.
Nice.
I This is my cultural touchstone, I guess.
Why not? Hey,
I'm sure this is what all these people were hoping for when they were creating things. Just one day a teen movie from 1995 would put it all together.
we made it, fam. We made it.
Yep. I really like this bit with Ty that I don't know if I've really noticed before, but she's alone, no one's dancing with her, and she has this like little jacket or like a blouse that she's wearing over her outfit, and she doesn't know how to wear it, and Cher's telling her to tie it around her waist. But then every time we cut back to Ty, she's done something different with this blouse.
Hmm.
Like, and it's to showcase how like she's alone and no one's talking to her, and it's like everything is a different position when we see her. And then like at one point she's between these two tall guys, like really tall guys, or maybe she's really short, I don't know.
Both. Who knows?
Both, yeah,
It's,
yeah, they're so tall you can't see all of them. But I do think it's really sweet when Josh shows up and dances with her.
yes.
I like Josh. I wish I knew how old he was, but I like Josh.
I don't want to know.
It's better that way.
I do like that bit though with Ty. It's kind of like old school comedy sight gag.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was, I don't know if I've ever noticed that before either, but it definitely made me laugh this time around.
Yeah, same.
We can't talk about this concert, not concert party thing without talking about the confusion Rachel thinks it's a concert because there's a band playing. So it's a really cool party for these 20 kids that they got into. But I bring up this band because if we're talking about that's so 90s, this
Hmm.
band is a ska band.
Yep. The Mighty
Yeah.
Mighty Boss Tones.
And super, super 90s vibes.
Hmm.
I unfortunately can't think of American ska music without thinking of a meme I've seen years ago where ska music is described as the noise that's playing in a 12-year-old's head when mozzarella sticks get delivered to their table. Something like that. God, that's kind of accurate, which is funny.
Watching this scene always makes me think of how, well, I guess like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones had a moment, but also
Hmm.
like Ska sort of did, but it also makes me think of how, like, big band, like, swing came back for, like, a little bit, but, like, the Cherry Poppin' Daddies and the
Hmm.
Brian Setzer, is that how you
Yeah,
say it? Yeah. Yeah,
something like that.
just yeah, I don't think I realized too, like, when the Mighty Mighty Bosstones had that one big hit, I don't think I realized they were the band from Clueless when that first came out until, like, much later. Um, I would also like to tell you that I agree with you that this is, like, the saddest stage dive I've ever seen.
He just leans forward and
He
hopes that
just
these 5 kids catch him.
yeah, he just sorta leans into the crowd and they, like, float him for a second and then put him back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy, it's probably like he asked to do that, and Amy Heckler was like, "What? Sure, but you can't jump on these kids. You
For
cannot literally
insurance
jump on these kids."
purposes. And I guess also it's not an elevated stage, really. It's not the kinda stage that you could, like, jump onto the people.
Yeah, it's like just at the right level where he can just slowly
Lean
lean
in.
onto them.
Slowly lean onto them, yes.
We're gonna fade right here. Okay, okay, Boss Stones, we're gonna fade on this lean and cut. Here's your
Oh,
mozzarella sticks. Go
it's
home.
I think it's even funnier too because his face looks so intense the whole time they're performing, and then he just like the most sad sack stage dive I've ever seen. Like he just looks like he's so into everything like the whole
Hmm.
time. Like he's like grimacing.
Yeah,
I'm always kind of like concerned when I see them
yeah. His
perform
face
in
does not
this.
match the music.
Yeah, he looks really angry. Like he would if the sound was off, I'd be like, this is a hardcore band. Like
Yeah.
based on his face.
Yep. Yeah.
Except also you would have to ignore, like, the
The
trumpets.
hats and more hats.
More hats. This leads us to the freeway scene where Dion and Cher are so surprised to learn that Christian is gay that they accidentally merge into the freeway.
Hmm. Yeah.
This is how I felt about the freeway when I was learning how to drive, so I understand.
Well, they learn because of Turk
Yes.
or Murray, whatever you want to call him. Turk.
Yeah, nice Turk, it's fine.
There's something going on. The conversation shares like, I just don't understand. I did all these things, and I'm like,
And
Christian's
he's not
kind of
into it. Mhm.
yeah, and I can't even remember all the slang Murray uses, but they're kind of ridiculous and very 90s. But basically
Mhm.
saying that he is gay,
Yeah.
and the girls are like, "Huh, huh," and he just come out and says it. They're like, "No," and they're not paying attention, and they just get right on the freeway.
Yep. And Dion is, I guess, in theory, still learning how to drive and she's terrified. I think they're all terrified. Even Turk is like, oh my God, you're getting on the freeway. And they're just screaming while she drives, like, probably whatever the speed limit was on the side street she just got off of. And
Hmm.
this is whenever my mom and I watch it together, this is like her favorite part. So I always think about that because we're just like cracking up at how terrified they are.
Yeah. First of all,
You're making it worse because 'cause you're driving, like,
yeah,
35.
right. Yeah, they get the truck bearing down on them, honking their horn. I think a bunch of angry bikers drive by. We get like a station wagon with a little granny giving the bird to them. His
Yeah.
little wrinkled finger sticking out of the window.
It's my favorite part.
Yeah. I want to point out though, and maybe I don't know the driving laws in California.
Mhm.
When you're learning to drive with your Toms, you have to have a licensed adult.
Oh, no, you're correct. Because Josh even, like, comments on this. That there's commentary throughout the movie that she's supposed to have an adult, and when her dad really puts his foot down, that's when she asks Josh to take her out driving to
Hmm.
practice,
Okay.
and that's, 'cause that's also when you see Josh by the pool reading Nietzsche, because he's in
Yes.
college now, he's an intellectual, but her dad makes a comment, she's gotten too many parking tickets, and he's like, "I didn't even think you could get parking tickets when you didn't have a license." And she's like, "Oh, sure, sure, you can." And he says something like, "From now on, you have to have an adult with you or a licensed driver with you, and like Dion doesn't count."
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but I guess Murray counts. But also, Dion's
No, I
not.
think they're just doing it. Just speaking of them all learning to drive, brings us to Cher's driving test. I hate this lead up to the driving test though, where she insults their maid. Their maid is Salvadorian, I believe, and Cher says, you know I don't speak Mexican to her, which first
Hmm.
of all, obviously Mexican is not a language. Secondly, the maid gets really upset because she's not Mexican, she's from El Salvador. I just feel like I don't know, I felt like this wasn't the kind of mistake that Cher would make. Like, yes, she's ditzy or whatever, but I feel like she's smarter than that, and I also feel like she would not be so offensive, just the way we've seen her characterization up till now.
Yeah, I do agree. It does seem a little off. The only thing I can think of is she's just so upset with other things. She just you lost your temper. You had a bad day, but it does seem a little out of character.
Yeah, and I understand they needed some sort of conflict leading up to her getting to the driver's test and like being too distracted to do a good job because she's also frustrated that now like Josh is upset with her and thinks she's a brat because he witnessed this whole thing. I just feel like there could have been something else that happened that would have been a little more in character for her.
Yeah,
It just I don't know. It just the sequence doesn't land right with me with like what we've seen of Cher up till now is all.
I agree. But at this point, too, she's very upset because Ty is now popular because she had a near death experience,
Oh
wink,
yeah, at
wink,
the
at the
mall.
mall,
Mhm. Yes.
where Cher's like, I literally had someone point a gun in my face. I was like, yeah, that was last week.
Yeah.
And so, all her friends are like now swooning over Ty. She's not the popular
Mhm.
one anymore. She's not in control. Uh,
Mhm.
her matchmaking didn't happen. Elton tried to make moves
Mhm.
on her. She didn't like that. The guy she liked doesn't like her because he doesn't like women. And now she's
Mhm.
starting to have feelings for her not stepbrother, college guy.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it. So she's like, she had a bad day, bad week.
Yep.
It does still seem a little odd.
Yeah. Cher ends up failing her driver's test. There's that really, famous line where she runs into a bunch of parked cars and asks if she should leave them a note. But she gets back home, finds Ty there hanging out with Josh. This leads to her and Ty having a conversation about how Ty now has a crush on Josh. She's like over Elton. She tells Cher, "You have to help me get Josh." And Cher's really taken aback, doesn't really know how to respond to this. And Ty says her very famous line, "You're a virgin who can't drive." And Cher responds with, "That was way harsh, Ty."
So harsh.
I use "that was way harsh, Ty" like all the time jokingly. And it's so awkward when people don't understand like the reference.
Hmm.
Because then they're like, "Who's Ty? What does that
Right.
mean?"
In this scene, though, I do find it funny. Ty comes over to burn things that remind her of Elton in the
Yeah.
fireplace.
Yeah.
And this is like the second or third time they make reference to this song, to their song, her and Elton's song. And every time another character she's talking to, she's like, huh? And she has to remind them that it's rolling with the homies, but she always has to do the little rolling
The the
dance.
the arm thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
Um,
funny.
which, yeah, they listened to that song for 2 seconds before she got unconscious.
Mhm, mhm,
And it's funny how earlier in the film, they're talking, Ty, Cher, and Dion, they're at the mall and they're talking about being virgins or not virgins and how Cher is very proud of that.
mhm.
And this seems like a conversation for like maybe a couple years down the line. And then you remember they're still 15. You're like, interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
but Cher is like, I don't think they really express it in a way like she's like like super saving herself for something like what her marriage or whatever. But she's like, yeah, this is where like she talks about how these are just dumb boys and it's like it's not worth my time. Like I got
Yeah.
things to worry about, like the mall and school.
My impression is that she has not found a good enough boy.
Yes.
The good enough boy is her stepbrother.
Why you gotta go there? Why you gotta say that?
Yeah. I do like the part where Cher realizes she likes Josh. She's like in front of a fountain and has this big revelation and like the music swells. It's very silly.
It's a good shot.
Later, we see Cher and Ty make up, and I just really love their dialogue that they're just so I love female friendship. I love that this movie almost puts that more at the forefront than romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Um, Apparently one of the reasons why no one wanted to make it. But
Too
whatever.
many female roles.
Mm-hmm. And I think Ty and Travis are so sweet together. Like, I wish we could have seen more of them together. I just think they're so cute. We just get this little bit of her watching him skateboard, and then, like, at the very end, they're all at the wedding together.
The wedding of the two teachers. So yeah, you mentioned Ty and Travis getting together and at the wedding. We obviously Turk and Dee are going to be there. Who's our third couple? How do they get together? Oh, it's stepbrother, old man Josh.
Oh, man, God.
Oh wait.
Okay, I did forget to point out, though, he makes a comment about freshman psych, or Cher does, and he's like, I'm not in freshman psych, or something. So I
He's
wonder
in
if that
senior
was.
psych now.
Well, that's what I was wondering, if they were just saying that to try to establish him as a freshman, but it just
Mm.
didn't work.
To me, it feels like he like I already took that class. I'm in a more advanced class. That's how I felt.
Yep, same. Anyway.
Later on, you see her working next to Josh at the table. There's another suited young guy there that's clearly working on the case
I
too.
Yeah, I think this third person is like an actual employee at the law firm.
Yeah, and Cher had like misfiled something, and
Mhm.
the third wheel guy is like complaining about it. He's like, oh my god, blah blah. And Josh's
Mhm.
like, well, she's here's the line that sucks too. Josh says, well, she's just a kid. Why?
Mhm.
Why say those words? So the lawyer guy is leaving, and Josh's like, hey, you can't go, man. We'll fix it. Like, our butts are on the line here. And the dude says, you guys do whatever you want with your butts. I'm calling in sick. And just slams the door and leaves.
Yep.
So dumb, but
So
it's.
dumb.
And so this leads to Josh going up the steps where Cher's like sitting on the landing waiting. And apparently, you said the trailer ruins this.
Yeah.
It's their first kiss, and then
Mhm.
it transitions to a wedding.
Mhm.
And that's the end of the movie.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have some other little pieces of trivia, I guess. Well, I did want to mention where everyone's careers kind of ended up after Clueless. Cher and Dion, I can't help feeling like they just stalled. Dion really did not go on to do much more, kind of like straight to video movies. Alicia Silverstone did become very famous, obviously. Like, we still know who she is. She got a $10 million production deal with Columbia Pictures. Only one movie came out of that, Access Baggage, which I do remember going to see in the theater specifically because it was Alicia Silverstone.
Mm-hmm.
It was not good. It did
Hmm.
not do well. And basically, they canceled the rest of her deal. She did reunite with Amy Heckerling for a movie called Vamps, which was like a vampire comedy. I have not seen it. I think it had really poor distribution. Like, it did not do well, but it also was not released into a lot of theaters. She also had a guest spot on a sitcom called Suburgatory, which Amy Heckerling directed a few episodes of. The show is about a single dad whose teenage daughter comes to live with him. The single dad is played by Elton, which I did not realize until they had Alicia Silverstone come do a guest spot as like a woman he was going on a date with. And they were billing it as this big Clueless reunion. I did not realize this guy was Elton. He had a lot of facial hair, and apparently that makes all the difference for me. I didn't recognize him at all. But that's like the only thing I could really tell you that Alicia Silverstone has been in that I've really seen since Clueless.
What about Batman and Robin?
Oh my God. How could I forget that?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't she do some sort of like another like teen movie, I guess? But she was with Brendan Fraser. He was like a baby born in like a time capsule type situation. Like they lived underground because of like the Cold War, and that's where they had the baby, and they just lived there the whole time. And so he
Like,
was very awkward and stuck in like the 20s
yeah,
away,
yeah. I remember this.
something like that.
Blast from the
Clearly,
Past or something like that?
oh yeah, I think that might be it.
Okay. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime because talk about
Mm,
90s Brendan Fraser,
we could pick a better Brendan Fraser.
The
There's a
Mummy.
lot more. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The Mummy.
I love The Mummy. Anyway, Paul Rudd obviously went on to have a very big career, but between Clueless and Friends, like, I don't remember seeing him in anything, but also I was young. It's not like I was going to see like any old movie. Obviously, after he did his stint on Friends, he went on to do a lot of comedies and he's part of the Marvel universe. I feel like we don't
Um,
really need to explain what happened to Paul Rudd, really.
no.
He did star in a rom-com with Jennifer Aniston called The Object of My Affection, which I thought was funny because then his next project was Friends,
Mm.
also with Jennifer Aniston, but then he was dating Phoebe. Brittany Murphy is more of a complicated one to talk about. She went on to do a lot of big movies: Girl Interrupted, Uptown Girls, Just Married, 8 Mile. She also was on King of the Hill. I believe she was 32 when she died, and there's still a lot of kind of like controversy and mystery with that. Supposedly, she died from pneumonia, which was complicated by her being anemic. But I watched the documentary, I think I mentioned earlier, What Happened Brittany Murphy, and she was she did have a lot of prescription drugs in her system, but everything that she had, apparently she had a valid prescription for. But the way they talked to the actual coroner who did her autopsy, and the way they explained it was that the combination of all these things, like her being weakened from being anemic, plus getting pneumonia, plus her husband never took her to the hospital. It was like just the combination of everything, like her body couldn't handle it. Also, apparently she was underweight. There were some rumors about eating disorders, just like the combination of that all, they just think maybe her body couldn't handle everything. But there was a lot of weird stuff that happened with her husband, and like her husband and her mom went on and did all these weird interviews where they seemed like way too close and kind of seemed like they might have been under the influence of something. Her dad also popped back into the picture at this point. He had never been around and he popped up to do like weird fake investigations about how his daughter really died, but he had like never been in her life before this. And then about a year later, less than a year later, her husband died from like the same thing, pneumonia.
It's all kind of weird.
It was very weird. I recommend watching the documentary because it's too much to really explain in a short period of time. But her husband was also like a con man. So like they do talk to Amy Heckerling is in it, and also Kathy Najimy, who was on King of the Hill with her. So it's interesting to get some insight from people who actually worked with her, not just, tabloid kind of stuff. Also, I should have mentioned Donald Faison went on to be in Scrubs. That's why we keep calling him Turk.
Yep.
Yep. Amy Heckerling's career really stalled after this. I've read a few interviews with her, and I feel like she just fell into part of it being just like Hollywood being shitty for women to work in, especially a woman director. She had written a movie, sort of like a romantic drama, maybe, with Michelle Pfeiffer and Paul Rudd. It got shelved because Michelle Pfeiffer was over 40 at the time, and the studio was convinced that no one wanted to see a woman over 40 lead a movie. Ended up,
Jesus.
right?
What the and also it's Michelle Pfeiffer, like very much like Paul Rudd, like ageless.
Well, right. Also, apparently, so the idea of the movie is Michelle Pfeiffer is like a single mom, like dating again. Her daughter is played by Saoirse Ronan, like her first movie ever, which I thought was so funny because I thought like her first movie was Atonement, but I'm surely she had things like leading up to Atonement, but maybe that was her breakthrough. But no, it got stuck in like pre-production hell, and funding was pulled, and then it finally got made, but then it turned out this like French businessman who had started a production company in Hollywood actually was like swindling them. So even once they got it made, they couldn't like pay everyone because this guy was a fraud. And then it got shelved for longer, even after it was made. Just like these really insane lows in her career that, weren't necessarily her doing or about the quality of her work. I think it was just studio stupidity. And like I said, just she was a woman writing scripts that centered women, and at least in this particular one, a woman who was over 40, so no one wanted to see it, or no one wanted to make it, rather. I think now it would be a little bit of a different conversation.
Absolutely.
But she also did a movie called Loser with Jason Biggs and I think Mina Suvari. Is that her name? The girl who was in American Pie.
Yeah.
So that was supposed to be a riff on The Apartment. Uh,
Hmm.
Billy Wilder is one of her favorite directors, but it did really poorly. It really bombed, and that affected her career as well because not to really harp on the sexism of this industry, but when you're a woman, if your movie doesn't do well, they don't really give you another chance.
Yeah, I can
uh,
see that.
yeah, because they act like they were taking a chance on you in the first place, basically.
Hmm.
However, she claimed that if they had let her keep the original cut of the movie, it would have been better. There was apparently feedback that R-rated comedies were not doing big business, so they had to cut it in a way to make it PG-13. Again, something that would be totally different now, but they were trying to tell her that R-rated comedies didn't make money at the time. I feel like after these two situations, she was kind of in like director's jail, so they is what
Yeah.
they call it, and she's still had a steady career directing television, but nothing that she's written on her own has really come out since then. Also, she had a secret child with Harold Ramis,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because in one of the interviews I read, someone told her she should be up there with like the great comedy directors given, her past hits, and someone mentioned Harold Ramis and Billy Wilder, and she was saying like, "Well, I was very close to Harold Ramis, but like I'm not going to say I'm like at his level." And then it turns out she had a whole secret kid with him.
Very
Um
close.
yes, it apparently came out because Harold Ramis's daughter, not the one he had with Amy Heckerling, wrote a memoir and like spilled that secret in the memoir. Apparently, it was like known within the family that that
Hmm.
was actually his kid, but she was raised for all intents and purposes as the daughter of Amy Heckerling's husband at the time. So
Oh.
like maybe that's why they're not together anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
So for Clueless, went on to become a TV show for
I
a
remember
couple
that.
years. Yeah, I do too. 96 to 99.
Don't think I watched any of it because, again, not quite marketed towards my demographic. But I think at this point, like I said, seen the movie in cable or whatnot, and it is what
Mhm.
it is. It's like I don't need that retelling on a TV, like a weekly TV show.
Yeah, and from what I mean, I remember watching it, but I went back and looked into it because it's not like I really remember it. I do remember, Alicia Silverstone was not Cher anymore. Obviously, like she got a production deal, but Dion was in it, Amber was in it. Brittany Murphy did not come back as Ty. Ty was kind of like written out of it, and it was nothing that really continued anything from the movie. Like Cher was not with Josh in the TV show. It was very much like things that came up at school, like a teen high school kind of sitcom.
I've watched a few episodes, I think, and I remember just being more in classroom stuff
Yes.
and
Mhm.
not like the cool California classrooms, just like regular
Just like regular.
desks that I had in my school. And
There is a new TV show apparently coming out. Both Amy Heckerling and Alicia Silverstone are involved in this newer TV show, and it's supposed to be more of a sequel to the movie, not like a spin-off with similar characters like the first TV show was. Kind of curious like how that would work because I don't feel like they're bringing the whole cast back at this point. Like everyone's really moved on to bigger and other things, and Brittany Murphy isn't even alive anymore. So interested to see how this plays out. Like people seem to be a lot more excited about this iteration because like I said, the two women are involved, but like I don't know if Alicia Silverstone is actually like going to be Cher again or if she's like more of a producer role.
yeah, if I can think of anything off the top of my head, it would probably be if she's in it, she's the mom, and like they're
Hmm.
focusing on like her kids,
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
or she's producing it and it's going to be similar. But if they're going to have connections to the original, it's going to have to be like a next generation thing. I would think.
Yeah, that would be my take too. Just one last note I had, the cinematographer for Clueless, Bill Pope, was also the cinematographer for The Matrix.
Nice.
I had no idea.
No, no.
I found the DVD extras online and they interviewed him, and he had this whole thing about how he asked Amy Heckerling how he wanted Clueless to be shot, and she said she wanted to all look like happiness. And he
Hmm.
said, "Well, what does that look like to you?" And he brought in all these different photos to show her. And he said, "Tell me which ones are like your vision of happiness and which ones aren't." And that's what he used to develop the look for Clueless,
Okay.
which I thought was just a really nice little story. One last thing. When I was doing my research, I saw an interview with the actress who plays Amber at a film festival celebrating the 25th anniversary of Clueless. Would you like to take a wild guess as to what film festival she was speaking at?
I had not the foggiest idea.
The Turner Classic Movies Classic Film Festival.
What? What?
That is how old we are.
Uh, well, pack it up. We're done. Wow, it's like when you hear like your favorite band when you're growing up on the classic rock station.
Yep.
Oof.
I literally did a double take when I saw like what they were attributing that interview to, and I was like, I'm sorry, Turner Classics. Oh boy. Anyway, now that you feel all old and decrepit, did Clueless hold up for you?
Yeah, back in my time when I watched that movie, I don't think I got the jokes as much as I did now,
Oh, for sure.
but yeah, I think it holds up. Funnier than I remember, but probably didn't care about the movie when I first saw it
Hmm.
all those years ago, and that kind of already kind of blocks out some of the jokes, but also yes,
Yeah.
the adult humor, the quick one-liners that you don't catch not only just because of your age, but just multiple viewings, you'll get something new every time.
Hmm.
I like the layers that we talked about, and also just like how Cher and her entourage, like they have these moments where you expect them to be children and act like children, and they do, and they say things that are bratty and dumb. But then like
Yeah.
you have these layered jokes that and like these real kind of emotional scenes that make them feel a little older.
Hmm. Yeah, it obviously still holds up for me, but like you said, I definitely didn't get all the jokes when I was watching this as like a kid, as a teenager. That all being said, like obviously I can appreciate how clever it is, all the layers of the characters, but I still feel like I notice something new every time I watch it.
That's good.
And even there are things that you pointed out that I had never noticed before.
That's what I'm here for.
Yep.
Got you.
Mhm. All right. Well, we would love to hear your thoughts on Clueless as well as your own favorite summer movies. You can find us on Instagram at Back Through the Lens Pod and on Facebook at Back Through the Lens. You can also email us at backthroughthelenspodcast@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to support our show.
If you enjoyed our show today, please give us a like and follow for updates on new and future episodes. Our show is produced by our host, Rachel Campbell, and myself, Joe Siomick, with additional help and support from Peter Telep of LPV Productions. Peter, Rachel, and I are also the executive producers. Our awesome logo is brought to you by Tom Faracci, and our wonderful theme song is by Matt Tarek. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more trips into our movie watching past on Back Through the Lens.
You want to have an existential crisis today? There it is.
That's how every day is, Rachel.